Labor campaigned on lifting the refugee quota to 1,500, but just 2 weeks ago, Winston Peters cast doubt on that promise, saying it wasn't a government commitment. But today, the coalition partners were singing from the same song sheet when they announced that the quota would indeed rise by that number by July 2020. So does this mark a change of heart for New Zealand First? Its leader, Winston Peters, joins me now. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm very well. I guess you win some, you lose some.
Now look, just to get the précis for the introduction right. I did not pour doubt on anything. I was in Nauru, and one of your colleagues, in an inimitable and typical way, made a claim that the government's policy was 1,500 refugees, and I said no, it's not. Then they continued to dispute that and made out that I was going rogue on a policy that the government had agreed upon, which wasn't true. The reality was that Labour Party had campaigned to increase refugee numbers, so had the Green Party. And on the 7th of March this year at Victoria University, I set out that we were for an increase in refugee numbers and that we could easily afford it if we dealt with other things first. And that was the page we all three were on. So in correcting one of your colleagues, the rest of you, not you personally, but tell them to turn into Refresh and try to show there was a difference of opinion. This is not a loss for New Zealand First, quite the contrary. It is a measure of our commitment and our seriousness of concern when people are living in degraded refugee circumstances.
Yeah, and at the time, though, Mr. Peters, you said, and I'll quote you, I'll read it right off the screen, you said at the time when you were pressed on this, we've got 50,000 people who are homeless back home, and I can show you parts of the Hokianga and elsewhere, parts of Northland with people living in degradation. We have to fix their lives up as well before we start taking on new obligations of the level that some people would like. What sort of obligation would you like as the leader of New Zealand First?
Hang on a minute. I'm getting your précis or your introduction right. The policy is not before July 2020. It's between July 2020 and the next year, 2021. And what we're going to do is, as I said at the time, we're going to ensure that the number of net immigration is dramatically down, and it's already starting to come down now. The second thing is we're going to get our housing program nationwide seriously going. And the third thing is we have to get Mangere, refugee settlement utility, up to scratch before we can even take this number. All those things were in my mind, and they're in the mind of the other parties as well, in terms of the timeline of introduction. So it's not a loss, it's a win for everybody.
Let's look at the substantive issue, Mr. Peters. We're talking about increasing from 750 to 1,500, and that is in a couple of years' time. So when you do compare to other countries and the refugee intake, are we really doing enough? If the Green Party wants 6,000, can we get upwards closer to that amount? Would you like to see us get closer to that amount?
Well, we are already taking in huge numbers of economic refugees as we speak. And the OECD pointed that out to us, that we were taking net, and of those numbers, a serious number of economic refugees, we were taking in over 72,000 net, was the figure that this government inherited. And we have said we are going to have to properly focus on that policy and deal with refugees through the United Nations in a proper way. And we are.
But would you like to go as far as the Greens and say that those economic refugees, as they're called, should be capped or even lowered, and we'd like to see more genuine refugees? Maybe that's a bit harsh to use the word genuine, but it really is Green Party policy to boost up those refugees that seem to be in more dire straits.
Look, I'd love to speak for the Green Party, but I'm not authorised. You'll have to speak to James Shaw or someone else. Now, please don't get me on the program to talk about other parties' policy. I'm talking about the coalition government's statement today, which is supported by the Green Party.
You seem to hint as well that there's a lot of work to be done before we can take on these extra numbers. Are we going to get there in time?
I believe so, yes, because we've quantified the amount of expenditure that's required. I mean, you just haven't got Mangere to fix up. You've got some regional centres to fix up as well. And then we've got to, as I say, process them through the United Nations. And at the same time, get our housing program going nationwide, from the top of the North Island to the bottom of the South Island, and start dealing to some of the inherited problems of neglect we received. Now, I might add to that at the same time, look, the refugee figures didn't move for 30 years. And I am pleased to say, if you would ask me, now totally separate, I don't want you to rush off and make a headline over this, could we do more? if we get on top of the problems as this reformist, well-being government is going to get on top of them, yes, we can do more, but not right now.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Deputy Prime Minister and leader of Coalition Government Partner New Zealand First, Winston Peters.